I want to welcome you to the UVIC premiere of Reaching Blue, shown tonight as part of the UVIC Sustainability Festival. My name is Robertson, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Science. And before beginning tonight's proceedings, I wish to acknowledge with respect that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. So let me begin by thanking the Institute for Studies and Innovation in Community University Engagement, which is quite a mouthful. So I'll abbreviate that from now on to ICQ. I want to thank them for organizing the Sustainability Festival and tonight's event. Tonight's event is in support of public engagement in science, which is part of a growing agenda that ICQ supports. I also want to thank the sponsors of tonight's event: Campus Planning and Sustainability, the Office of Interdisciplinary Academic Programs, the UVIC Sustainability Program, the Environmental Law Center, the BC Sustainable Energy Association, Van City, and the Capital Regional District. And so could you just join me in giving them a round of applause for their support? Now, I think everyone in this room knows that there's a wealth of talented and passionate people in Victoria and at UVIC who care about this place that we call home. And I think your presence here places you in that group. But by home, I wish to be fairly liberal and say that I'm not just talking about Victoria, I'm not just talking about Vancouver Island or even British Columbia, but indeed the entire planet. Because sustainability is an activity for, it's an activity for many, it should be for all. Now, I want to take this opportunity because I am a dean to talk a little bit about the Faculty of Science, because if you give a dean a microphone, they have to go and promote their faculty. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you something about the Faculty of Science and also about our role in sustainability and fostering that activity. So the faculty itself is home to 6 departments and schools, namely biochemistry and microbiology, biology, chemistry, earth and ocean sciences, mathematics and statistics, and physics and astronomy. We lead a consortium that manages the Banfield Marine Station, and we have close ties to Oceans Network Canada, whose underwater observatories, these are the Venus and Neptune platforms, that are providing novel, indeed unprecedented information and understanding about the ocean's environment. And I can state with pride that the activities that are taking place in the Faculty of Science contribute significantly to elevating UVIC into the top 200 of universities worldwide. Now, many of my colleagues in biology and earth and ocean sciences and their students in particular are experts in research areas that touch on issues of sustainability, including population and community ecology, marine and conservation biology, chemical and physical oceanography, fisheries, evolutionary biology, plant and tree physiology, marine and biogeochemistry, structural tectonic geology, climate modeling, and climate change. So I just ask you to consider as just one example our programs in the School of Earth and Ocean Sciences, which are designed to understand the atmosphere, the earth, and the oceans as a global system. For only by truly understanding their independent properties, but also understanding the interactions between them, can we help to learn what the factors are that will allow us to sustain their integrity for future generations to come. In short, our position as a UVIC Science is not just about studying problems, but it's also about seeking solutions. Now, the agenda for tonight's event will be as follows. After screening the film, Reaching Blue, Leslie Brown, director of ICQ, will moderate a panel discussion on what is happening and what more can be done by UVIC with community and Indigenous partners to sustain the environment. We'll then in the evening with a just released short video on the doctoral work of Nick Claxton and the reef net fishery. So the main event, of course, is the movie. So let me take this opportunity to introduce Ian Hinkle, who's the creator of Reaching Blue. Ian is a UBC graduate in film who's worked as a documentary filmmaker since 1992. He's a veteran of numerous award-winning adventure projects worldwide, which has led to a deeper understanding of our planet. His directorial debut was The Living Coast, shown on the Discovery Channel. He was the cinematographer on the film Born to the Wind, shown on PBS and ESPN in 1999, and the writer, director, and producer of The Long Road North in 2008. Ian works with Global Reef, a full-service TV, video, and social media venture. The organization develops original educational entertainment to generate awareness, inspire action, and promote socially responsible businesses. Ian and Global Reef co-produced the shorter version of Reaching Blue with Andy Robertson from UVIC Oceans Networks Canada, and then went on to create a full-length version of Reaching Blue for the CBC. And tonight, we're privileged to show this movie as the UVIC premiere of the full-length version. So please join me in welcoming Ian to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. I don't want to talk really before you see the film. Thank you for the introduction. It's going to show on the middle screen. So do people sitting over on the edge want to move in? Because you're a little... You don't have to, you know, but we'd all feel a little better, a little closer. As mentioned, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and a year ago, I was talking to Andy Robertson, who's here tonight, the co-director and co-producer of the film with me. A year ago, we were talking about being out at sea, and Andy was working with Ocean Networks Canada and telling me stories about going out and meeting all these scientists that were doing some amazing research on the ocean. And we asked the question, how can you share a story or share stories about issues that matter? And so we came up with a short film that then turned into a 1-hour film we developed into this longer piece that you'll see tonight called Reaching Blue. And I think we should just run the show. And we will be here to get into a discussion afterwards. So,
thanks to Ian and Andy. We've got a short period of time to have a panel. So where are my panelists? We've got Sue and Kevin and Nick and Andy and Chris. Where's Chris? You want to call him down? Please?
I don't think Chris is named.
Chris, is Chris not?
Chris Jarman.
Chris Tollefson. Yeah. Chris is here.
We're always
Come on in, have a seat. We've just got a few minutes. I've asked each one of them. I'll introduce them one at a time as we go along. But the question that I'm asking them is what's happening and what more could be done by UVIC with community and Indigenous partners to sustain the environment. So as we think about the optimism and as we move forward, what are some of the ideas that they have about us moving into the future? So maybe we'll start with the star of the show, Kevin. Let me introduce Kevin. Kevin, you saw him in the film, and Kevin is the youngest son of the late Philip Christopher Paul, former long-time chief of Sartlet Band, and co-founder of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and the National Native Brotherhood, now the AFN. Kevin grew up utterly surrounded by politics, culture, art, and family. As much a fan of his mother as his father, love and generosity are the first words that come to mind upon hearing his mother's name, Frances Elliott Paul. Kevin graduated with a BA in Writing and English from UVIC and an MFA in Writing also from UVIC. In his early to mid-1990s, Kevin worked with the Institute of Ocean Sciences in Sydney in an effort to collaborate traditional Saanich knowledge with modern scientific discovery. Through his work with iOS, he contributed to the completion of the first comprehensive map of traditional Saanich territory. So over to you, Kevin.
Techo siam. Ai spa consonant techo. Thui ai spa consonant techo. Stjanoi misqayrqan. Ahasan qanas an au an qaylia. Yes, that. I suppose what I have to say is about when it comes to talking about Saanich is that when I see myself on film, it's always unnatural, and I've seen myself on film a lot, and I've heard myself on radio a lot. It's always unnatural because what I say is always, to me, a complete thought I've been working on. And is selected from to make films like this, to make somebody else's complete thought. And they did a very good job. And maybe I can make a bit of an analogy out of this, on the other hand. Because when I was talking about the sea singing us lullabies, really what I was talking about was the closest thing we have to a lullaby in Saanich is the sound of the sea. I've been entrusted with a lot of knowledge from my grandfathers, from my grandmothers, from my older relatives, and they almost always reference as one of their earliest memories waking up in the belly of a canoe, traveling somewhere in the ocean, going whoosh, 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 against the boat. And in their houses, when we were forced into individual living, usually the grandfathers or grandmothers would stop by, and that was the lullaby they sang at your bedside. So, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. On top of that, there's another story that I would wish to tell you, that I wish to tell you, that I can't. And it's the story I want to tell you is about a story I can't tell you about. And we were given a name to speak when we were in trouble on the sea. When the sea is showing its indifference. And it's part of our job for it to forget that indifference. It's the story of a lover, a man, in search of his lover. And for showing proper respect to the woman he was in love with. Astute respect, whole respect. There are many names for it. Many translations in English because I'm translating as we speak. He was given this gift, this name, that would help us deal with what felt like the sea's complete indifference at times like this. And that's what I can't tell you about. Because it's a part of the spiritual world, our continual mending with the most neglected part of ourselves these days, which is our spiritual side. It goes by a lot of names these days. Superstition is one of them. It is treated like a lesser mythology than is the Bible treated. For instance, the analogy I'm drawing upon here is that in the context of this film, the words they chose were fine. But in a whole context, we're always leaving something out when we try to talk about the things we're trying to talk about today. And if I have something to contribute, it's from my language, often, which is a map to bring us back to a more innocent, a more whole, and beautiful world. Thank you for listening to me today.
Next, we should go to the, now that we've had one of the stars speak, maybe some of the creators. We'll start with Andy. Andy Robertson is a science communicator and filmmaker, producing issue-based documentary films and multimedia communication materials. His most recent project is the Reaching Blue film. In his role as video communications specialist with Oceans Networks Canada, Andy communicates ocean science and discovery to new audiences by exploring new and evolving tools of communication. The focus of his communication strategy is impact and awareness through storytelling. Over to you.
Thank you. I guess I'll stand too to start at the trend. Thanks for having me tonight. And I usually like to let the thing I make speak for me because it's a little bit easier. I can gather my thoughts in a non-linear environment and package them and then present them, and then I sit in the back and leave quickly as soon as it's over. Tonight is not the case, but thank you for having me. I think most importantly, just as you see in the film, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to connect stories to larger audiences, any audience. It's how we have always related to each other, and we sit around the fire and we tell stories. And so I see, going out to see some of the footage out there. I was out tossing around and interviewing a scientist who is, at that moment, have just pulled up a water sample, and they're looking and they're starting to collect data, and they see changes happening, and they all see it. It's consistent with everyone that I spoke with, and they're terrified. And so, I'm in the middle of these interviews, and I run out and throw up off the side of the boat for a little bit and come back and continue on because I'm seasick. And I just realized that packaging each of those stories individually and putting it on YouTube, it disappears. And, and I've done a few of those. And it's not as impactful as talking to a different group of people that are all sharing a different part of the same story and bringing those together and looking way into the past and into the future and what we're looking at. And so I kind of see, my medium is using light and sound and video and packaging that together into something that helps tell a story. And with what we're seeing with the climate and climate change, I think that's kind of a good path forward. And for a place like UVIC and all of the different amazing research that's going on here, each of those projects has a story that could be told. And it usually comes from the heart and people who are living it, and so that's kind of my goal, is to tell those stories. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I could, yeah?
Yeah, it seems to be the logical
Following up,
storyteller.
okay. My name is Ian Hinkle. Thank you for starting us off. I'm curious actually about who's here tonight. How many people are students at UVIC? And faculty? And other? Okay. All right. The reason I ask is, as Andy said, it's about finding audiences, and this is where this project started. Andy and I were asking, how do we make a story, be it about the ocean, about changing the ocean, about science, and find different audiences. And in every group, and it's great that you guys are here tonight, but in every group there's really specific subgroups. And this film, Reaching Blue, was one little attempt at reaching some of those groups. So first off, I'm glad you're here. I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation. I don't want to get too far into this, but I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm interested in media strategy in terms of reaching those audiences. And so as we talk tonight, I do want to come back to you all at the end and ask, how do we get a story like this to more places? Or more specifically, perhaps, who do you know that might want to see this film or might want to share this film? Whether that's through your own networks, through other groups that you're associated with. So I'd love to just sort of move along here, but keep that in mind as, we put together a story, and hopefully we can take this a little further. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Sue. I think Sue's next. Sue Hallat is an urban planner with the Capital Regional District, and we're so glad CRD is here tonight. She has recently been posted to a new position with the CRD, tasked with establishing the Aboriginal Initiatives Office. Her job is to mend the gap in regional governance by bringing interested First Nations on whose territory the CRD jurisdiction resides to the decision-making table. She put away her government statutes, procedures, bylaws, and fancy strategic plans after learning very quickly and with some humility that prior to launching any initiatives, there must be a solid foundation of trust. She's singularly focused now on facilitating relationship building between and among governments. Not surprisingly, there are no playbooks for this, but she's working to change the title of her office to First Nations Relations, because it has a nicer ring to it.
Thanks. If you don't mind, I'll just sit because I've just been writing down things as we come along. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to say here. Thought I'd just sort of feel the vibe and get a sense of it. It's become increasingly clear to me over the time that I've had the privilege of being in this office of why it is so important to acknowledge the territories, this place where we are. When I first started this, I felt really awkward. I really didn't actually know. I knew, I did the research, I knew it was the right thing to do, but it wasn't with ease. And being here in this beautiful building on this beautiful land, and remembering, just being very mindful that this is the land where we now play and live and work and sleep, and is a place where the Sinchacan speaking people and the Algonquin speaking people have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And it comes with more ease for me now. It's in my bones. I feel it more and feel comfortable. And this mindfulness I now am bringing to my work. And seeing this movie also, it's just so, it's helping me to understand that as we move forward in our work at the local government level, our mandate is also sustainability. I see Rita in the audience. Sustainability is, it comes out of our mouths all the time. We have a sustainability department. We have a sustainability plan, and we don't really know what that is. And as we move forward in our office, our job is to fix the gap in governance with the First Nations. And we can see that our way forward is with the First Nations, because that's where the knowledge is as well. And this is so beautifully expressed how we have to move forward together. And the question that you asked was, what can the university do to help us moving forward in sustainability? To keep up with the mariner theme in this, I really feel like we're navigating new waters. We don't really know what we're doing. We don't know how to move forward. We don't know how to send signals to our First Nations governments that we want to work together, and we want to build trust, and we want to reconcile. We need to reconcile how we've been doing things and how we have essentially destroyed your beautiful land, and we need to make amends. And we don't know how to go forward, and so the university, I think, plays an incredible role in being our partner in helping us. I see Ken is there helping. He works with the mapping project, and that's been incredibly helpful for us to make connections so that we can learn about what the traditional names are for these lands, and what the traditional just what would those maps look like with First Nations presence, with the Saanich people telling their stories. So thank you to the collaborative mapping is a real help for us. As we are trying to build trust, there's something about the university, I think, I don't know if it's true, but my sense is that it's objective. It doesn't have, feels a little bit more pure than government. Maybe it's not. Maybe university is a business like anything else, and it has, you have your own challenges. But I guess I just wanted to put it out there that we really we need all the help we can get in navigating this move towards reconciling our work and moving forward in partnership.
Thank you. Glad the CRD's here. Next, Chris Tollefson is the founding executive director of the UVIC Environmental Law Center and a professor at the UVIC Law School. He's currently representing conservation sector clients in litigation involving Northern Gateway in the Federal Court of Appeal and the Trans Mountain Pipeline hearings before the National Energy Board. He is also counsel to a public interest client in a major air pollution case involving Rio Tinto's Kitimat smelter. He was appointed as the Hakai Chair in Environmental Law and Sustainability in 2011. And we're very glad you found us tonight.
I guess everyone knows the story.
Yeah, he got a little lost.
Well, fortunately I'd seen the film a couple of times, and this is my third time watching it. I want to thank the organizers, of course, for inviting me, and for you folks for coming. I want to talk a little bit about the Environmental Law Center, what we do, because it does connect up with my reaction to the film and kind of how I think this film identifies some things that we could potentially move on. The Environmental Law Center is a nonprofit society that runs a public interest environmental law clinic here at the University of Victoria that provides pro bono legal services to conservation organizations, First Nations, and community groups around the province. It is a remarkable range of services that we provide, everything from going to the Federal Court of Appeal on Northern Gateway to working on mapping projects and very community-based education and outreach projects of various kinds. We're also part of something called the Hakai Network, which is this incredible new organization that has recently been born that supports research by scientists on Central Coast issues. And the feeling I got watching the film, actually, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, the feeling I got watching the film was very reminiscent of a meeting that I attended of that network last Friday, where up to, I think it was close to 200 young scientists were talking about their work in similar terms to the way that you, I think, heard the scientists talking today. In fact, two of the scientists featured in this film, Dr. Darmont and Dr. Solomon, are part of that network. My reaction to the film, I guess, is it felt empowering. It felt very positive. I was impressed by the resilience and the confidence that the subjects displayed in the face of profound challenges. The confidence that working together communities can overcome some of these issues. And it was a nice feeling, because right now in the cases that I'm doing against Northern Gateway and the other cases that we're talking about, it feels pretty grim. It feels pretty brutal sometimes. It isn't a happy place. Last night I was up till 2 in the morning writing a motion in this Rio Tinto case, and litigation, although very necessary, is a different kind of place to be. And so I think it's important, and I guess this takes me to kind of my thought about this film and how I want to think about it going forward. How does this film and how does science, which I think is a core part of this film, how does that interact with my world, the world of law? And it feels to me like I certainly, a lot of the work that the LC is now doing is playing defense. We're fighting against ill-conceived projects. We're fighting against the muzzling of scientists. We're fighting to protect whistleblowers. It feels like we're always kind of reacting, at least on many of the files that we're doing. And I think the hopeful part, and I think this does go back to the sort of founding vision of the LC, the hopeful part, though, is that we're not always going to have to play defense, and that we should be playing offense, and that if a film like this and the vision and the people that it profiles can help, with the help of lawyers and law students and legal researchers, to think about how we can articulate a compelling alternative vision about how the coast, how the future of the coast can run. And I think there's kind of some very nice, there's some very nice elements to that picture. Science brings part of it. First Nations is a huge and central part of that. Law has to be there as well. And I think that part of, the uncertainty that scientists have about the future is that they don't know what law and politics will yield when science is brought into that mix. And so those conversations, like the ones that we're going to have tonight, I think those conversations are very important. So thank you very much.
The next person on the panel is Nick Claxton, and I'm very glad Nick is here tonight. Nick is from the Sayout Band of the WSÁNEĆ Nation. He's an Indigenous advisor in the Indigenous Education Program here at UVic and is also a PhD candidate in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction here. Through his work and study, he's committed to revitalizing Indigenous knowledge and practices. And after Nick speaks and we have a chance to all talk, the last thing we're going to do tonight is actually show a 5-minute film of Nick's PhD work. So look forward to that. It's really good. So Nick, over to you.
Siam Shilicha. Jane Quantanate Techo. I can squeal and Kunis Kanana Ella. Jane I can squeal and Yakan, Eta, Dana Elanganata. Humto, Danasne, Soleil and up, stay out. Neath WSÁNEĆ Dana Elanganata. First of all, I want to acknowledge Kevin. It's a real honor to be on a panel with Kevin. We come from the same community. I really respect the knowledge he holds and he's been entrusted with. Shortly after he worked at iOS, I got involved in some projects there. Shortly after he came to UVic, I came to UVic. Shortly after he graduated from high school, I graduated from the same high school. It's like I kind of follow in his footsteps, and I really respect how much his work is really situated within the WSÁNEĆ knowledge system. And I understand what you're saying about how those little fragments of what you're sharing in the film are part of a more complete thought and knowledge system. And I think I can relate to that with the same kind of, with the work that I do. I understand that, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I came prepared to talk a little bit about what is happening at UVic with regards to working with Indigenous communities and concerning sustainability, I guess. In my work in Indigenous education here, I work with our language revitalization programming. In Indigenous Ed, we have undergraduate language revitalization programs that are community-based and language-specific, and we have partnerships with our community in WSÁNEĆ, and we have a partnership with the North Island communities. I'm saying this because our connection to the land was through the language. Our knowledge systems and our practices are sustainable. So revitalizing language goes hand in hand with revitalizing sustainable practices. As Leslie said, I coordinate our graduate Indigenous Language Revitalization program. And I have a real privilege and honor to see so many students from Indigenous students who are working on their masters in language revitalization. And those students are gaining academic skills to lead community language revitalization and in turn leading towards sustainable practices. I also want to note that there are ever-increasing numbers of Indigenous students here at UVic. It's probably a lot different than you and I did our bachelor's here. And there's also increasing numbers of Indigenous faculty and staff. But I do think that those numbers need to continue growing. And I note that it's a part of the university's strategic plan. And I'm also, as a graduate student, I'm aware of the amount of and the growing amount of Indigenous scholarship and Indigenous methodologies. So those are good things that are happening. What more can be done? I still think there needs to be stronger relationships to communities and doing research in a good way. And I really think that needs to start with connections to the local territories where this university is situated. You know, I acknowledge that there's that being done, but I still think there needs to be more. I would really like to see more local Indigenous faculty. I can't help but notice in the film and notice in academia in general that there are scientists and science working with Indigenous peoples and local peoples. But really, once you get to understand our knowledge systems more, we were scientists too. Our knowledge is valid, important. And I think that goes hand in hand with all of us while we're here. I think we have a great deal to learn from each other. It's not just important for Indigenous peoples, but it's important for everybody. I think Kevin might have talked about that in the film. And just like Kevin, the short video that we'll see is just a snippet of this really broader work. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank you all for allowing me to be on this panel.
So now we get to turn it over to you. Questions, comments to any of the panelists, to each other. It's your turn to say what your impressions were. Yes.
My comment would be, first of all, I very much enjoyed the movie, and I appreciated the opportunity to listen to all the panelists. Thank you for helping put this together and letting me talk. I think we're living in a much more polarized world than we've had before. This was underlined a bit by events this past week where people are talking about individuals getting radicalized. And we're going to have new laws now coming out to target these radicalized people. And we're kind of aware that environmentalists or people with environmental interests and Aboriginals as well are potentially going to be targeted by these new laws. And I want to sort of turn this around and say, you know, who is it in this world who's really radicalized? Is it the environmentalists? Is it Aboriginal peoples wanting to protect their territory? Or is it Stephen Harper and his cronies who are trying to fire up big business and transport tankers through delicate waters?
With all due respect to you, and I do respect that, this radicalization that you've discovered or this polarization, I should say, that you've discovered. It was a polarization that our people met about 160 years ago, and that we're trying to recover from that. It's a polarization. We're finding that the knowledge that was beaten, raped, assimilated out of us is the knowledge you're turning to us for now. That polarization is already there for us. We were never thrown out of the Garden of Eden. We still live there. We're just on the fringes of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been watching films and movies about the ocean for 50 years. And about this film, it triggered a thought, namely that over those 50 years, movies, the films about the sea have gone through phases. And for the longest time, they've been very technical and scientific. And what I really liked in your film is that there's science, but there's other parts, and that's really a reflection of where we are in terms of the so-called postmodern environment in which we have to discuss those complex issues. And I thought the film as well is a good reflection of this environment. And another comment is you're looking for specific suggestions as to where we could show this movie. You mentioned the Institute of Ocean Sciences. They have a nice auditorium there, and often they don't know how to use it.
Didn't look too busy tonight.
I understand. And you were at the Mary Linspear Center last week, so certainly that would be also a big thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Comments? Anyone else?
I'll just to comment to the first part of the sort of the change in ocean films. As we made it, we were constantly trying to ground ourselves in making sure we were communicating to people who don't live on the ocean, because we all live in such a beautiful place. We can connect. We have more of a connection. I was born and raised in Edmonton, and so I was making this for people in Edmonton, the friends of mine that don't have that everyday relationship with the ocean and the beauty. So keeping it accessible and open to kind of like bring everyone in to fall in love with the place, and then tell the story through that. So that was a consideration that sort of it was somewhere in what you were saying. I felt that.
Yes, somebody was criticizing the film the other day, which was great. And they were complaining that there wasn't enough science. They wanted some numbers and the nuts and bolts, and I was all for that, but that wasn't the movie. Which was okay. I was like, all right, well, let's have that conversation. But yeah, there was that attempt with this film. We wanted to include some science, but we wanted to tell a story that people would actually want to watch on a Friday night.
I kept wanting to put more science in.
For the record.
Can we quote Steinbeck?
When I was sitting up there, Rob, the Dean of Science, leaned over and said he was so pleased with the film because there's science in there. I said,
oh, good. So we had
yeah.
You can't always take out the scientists.
So there you go. So
I
the
think
scientists are
that
happy.
I think that a documentary like this, with all due credit to yourselves, and thank you for it. It can bring you to where it starts. It can introduce you. It can't ever give you enough, unless you're the kind of person searching for enough. And that's and so what they did was deliver you to the doorstep, and the rest is up to you. And they did a very good job of delivering you there.
Yeah, absolutely. You had your hand up back there? No? Nate?
Yeah, I'm interested in this the disconnect. I'm more recently working at the university, and I've never worked for government, and I worked with NGOs where we kind of grappled with stuff in the community and issues, environmental law centers involved with them. And coming to a university, and even if government mirrors universities, the silos in science and law and business and engineering. And again, there's culture. Science was law, was the economy was, there's reasons for that. I won't get into that, why that happened. And I'm interested to hear from really Leslie and Chris and the Dean of Science is, what do we need to do to have these real conversations we're having now, but really conversations about reality? The fact is, it's not divided, but it's been divided for different reasons. And it's the students themselves, and I know the disciplines themselves are folding in and getting more interdisciplinary, but we need to get that going pretty fast because I think the issues are critical, and I really resonate with what you're saying, Chris. We had Nick meet a biology professor, John Taylor, who's trying to make Oak Bay and this region a more of a living lab for students to really work in. We don't need to go far away oceans, other parts of the world. It is one huge ocean. Why aren't we having comprehensive living labs and really good local work, which is grounded in First Nations knowledge? Why aren't we doing it right here? Well, what will it take? And he met Nick, and he was saying, well, it's hard to do public science because you have to be paid to do science, And then you were talking about Kinder Morgan, giving is say that scientists, their own scientists, to be able, getting free environmental assessments. Where we've got this critical, there's these huge issues right on this territory, right in the Salish right now, about law, about corporations, about science, about indigenous knowledge. And I think it's why I like being at the university, is because it's a space. It's a space for neutral, and yes, I don't know what the word objective means, but actually a discussion. And it's the students who are pushing that, it's communities, and it's Aboriginal people reminding us that the artificial divide is constructed. So I'm interested in what you guys think we could do more. And I know the law's been trying to do more. What can we do to bridge the divide and bring more interdisciplinarity? What kind of projects would help? So maybe start with you.
Yeah, Rob, you want to?
Or what's happening now? Because you haven't been able to, you're not on the panel, but
Right, so I agree with a lot of your statements. There's a lot more to be done. It's actually growing more and more. So if I look at the ONC component, that's a really beautiful mixture of engineering and science. Right? Science can't do it by itself, you need the engineering component. I think what's interesting in science, in my own opinion, is that there's a move towards complexity. If you think about the individual scientists, they'll pick a particular project, an area, do very deep research. But if you want to look at something like the ocean, that is such a complex system that one individual cannot do it. And so what's going to happen as a result is that naturally teams will come together with the different expertise to build the infrastructure, the expertise base that you need to answer something which is not a simple number, but is an interconnected web of data and phenomena. So, but of course that also requires resources. And so to put that all together, we do need a government that understands the need for the resources and for that type of funding. And it certainly is the intent of certainly UVIC back here across the country and around the world to build these teams to really understand these global phenomena.
I suppose that's an administratively satisfying answer. But to answer to a real need, we got to push a little harder than that, I think. To answer to a real need, we have to push a little harder than that, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things I would say is that, and we were talking about this morning in the workshop this morning as part of today's Sustainability Festival, was how universities have been constructed around disciplines that go way back, and those disciplines may not be the way to organize our moving into the future. That maybe it is, as Rob was saying, around oceans. We have a scientist, we have a lawyer, we have a poet, we have community people, as if university people aren't community people, but we have a group of us, a great diversity that come together around a challenging social issue, a challenging something that we all care about. And I think that's going to be the future for us moving ahead, is learning to work across difference. And that's I think our biggest challenge, is how do we, whatever that difference is, learning to work across difference, I think is going to be our challenge in moving it forward.
And I think if I can just follow up, and Andy also wanted to add something, but that Andy and I really started this project, I think, with that in mind, but also thinking that engineers and scientists doing some research aren't enough. That in order to get the buy-in from those other communities and all the communities that we're in, we have to share the story. And we share our story, whether that's here at the university with the projects that the university is involved in, or these other stories that matter, and find ways to talk about that outside of the university.
Can I make one comment? I totally agree with you. One thing that's a real problem with stumbling block is that actually within the different disciplines, we all speak a slightly different language.
Yes.
And so actually our buzzwords, our way of thinking about things, the culture of our disciplines are very, very different even within the university and outside the university. And sometimes that barrier of breaking down, or enhancing that communication strategy would be incredibly critical
Who's Chris? Go for it.
I guess I want to offer this as a reaction. I know that has kind of been something that I've had a long-term concern about, but I do see things changing, and I think one of the encouraging things is the new generation of scientists like Anne Solomon and Chris Darramont, and the willingness of UVIC to kind of create room for someone like a Chris Darramont to come in, partially funded through Raincoast, he's still very active, as you can see, and same with Anne, very active in working with communities, in being mindful and engaged in the real world in a very, I think, in a very proactive and sensitive way. So I think that's great. The Hakai Network is another really interesting experiment that is exactly what you're describing, Dean, in terms of this team approach. The third thing that's encouraging is at the law school here at UVic, we now have a bit of a reputation in terms of being a center of excellence in terms of public interest environmental law. And so we're now getting scientists, folks who have 2 or 3 degrees in science and want to make a difference in the world. They're coming to UVic to do a law degree and work in public interest environmental law, drawing on, leveraging their science. And I think that is amazing. The capacity that we've been able at my center to enjoy as a result of some of those young people just over the last couple of years is remarkable. So there are some positive things happening, but much, much more needs to be done.
Well, I just wanted to say, fits both of those, that I was really lucky to start working with Ocean Networks Canada close to 4 years ago, and I started with the Deep Water Video Archive, which is massive. It's one of the largest remotely operated vehicle HD video archives in the world, and terabytes and terabytes of material. So I got into that, but I worked in the film industry before and had worked in video production. And so I was always I felt like a mole. I got to go in and work with these videos, but then go and interview, and that we have engineers, and we have scientists, and we have partners, and I could go anywhere and interview anyone. And so I started to build this collection of interviews, and that's when I kind of started to see the silos, and I would learn the language from each group, and then I could ask the question over and over again until they could say it in a way that stripped it of the jargon and the acronyms. And so I guess with that, it's kind of, if you can get different groups of people that come from different disciplines working together, especially, I call it a creative discipline, but there are a lot of unemployed filmmakers, and there are a lot of university departments that could hire, one in each department. And I would suggest that's a good way to start, start telling stories. Yeah.
Yes, back there.
Yeah, just a question for the filmmakers. Curious about sort of next steps. I appreciate what you said, Kevin, about sort of this opening the door for us to, our job to sort of move forward on that. And I guess I sort of feel that barring some sort of revolution, we still have the system we're in, and we still have, our electoral process ahead of us, and we don't hear ocean acidification. We don't hear climate change mentioned that often. We don't hear loss of biological diversity mentioned that often. So we just maybe see a follow-up to this, and what are some activism towards sort of things that are happening, or options, or I'm just curious kind of that next step, that going from passion to what can we do about it, or what are other people doing about it? Maybe it's just if you want to comment on that.
Sure. Well, I think you're right. Ocean acidification is possibly one of the biggest stories that we're not hearing about, and hopefully that'll change. And as we even, talking to some of the scientists who are in the film, they're saying, well, this is new for them to be looking at, and they're scared. And so they are saying, yeah, this is something we need to actually act on. You said, I think, something along the lines a moment ago that, well, this is the world we live in, so what's next, right? Simply put, I think we do need to see a transition away from the carbon economy. And so that involves all of us. I drove here tonight, just for the record. You drove around in circles.
Oh, yeah.
Came here. Yeah, so, we all burned some carbon to get here. Yeah. So we're all a part of it. We can make a film and sit around a table afterwards. But my hope with a film like this is to, on the first level, just actually having the conversation and say, hey, the oceans are changing fundamentally, massively, and we can see it in our own backyards. This isn't just a theory of numbers, it's something that you can go and see just down the street. Having that first conversation, I think, is helpful. And then there are a lot of environmental groups that are working on these issues. there are political groups that are taking this on. I think political change or at least political engagement on every level, from our local politics, provincially and federally, is something that us as individuals have to get involved in. So that's your job.
One more question, and then we'll show the film.
Yes. I'm with the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and last Monday we had a speaker on behavioral change. And change happens when consciousness changes. And then she put a PowerPoint slide together, and she painted it rather than, she introduced creativity into every element of her presentation. And I watched the audience just getting totally enveloped by what she had to say. And then, of course, she had written her own song, and she broke into song. And I mean, it just clinched the night. Everybody left with much more understanding about how we need to work together. And what's happening here tonight is really quite powerful. It's powerful to me because the stories that we heard in the film and the creativity, the poetry that was captured on film, the beautiful images, really kind of had an impact on my consciousness that's so different from the normal run-of-the-mill thing that we often go to with climate change. And so our organization is we're just kind of breaking out into that right now. We have a year-long series where we're taking all of the serious issues relating to climate change, the big heavy things like carbon tax and national energy strategy and housing and buildings and transportation and environment and the economy. We're leading up to the next federal election where we will then hold all candidates meetings and bringing together all of these issues, hopefully from a perspective where we can be a better educated audience. But I also wanted to say, one of the things, if you haven't heard this fabulous group from Salt Spring called The Only Planet Cabaret, has anybody heard about that group that's been here? The Only Planet Cabaret is fundraising for Ravens Trust because they're totally convinced that the several Aboriginal groups up along northern BC are going to make the difference. And so the Only Planet Cabaret, we're going to bring them back, and that's maybe a group that you might want to bring over to the university. They've done this song on the Salish Sea, and they've taken Northwest Passage from Stan Rogers' song, and have created a song called Boundary Passage. And it's all about keeping tankers out of the Salish Sea, but they've done it in such a way that you just want to sing along with them. And just wanted to also tell you that Getting Higher Choir has just chosen that song for their concert in January. So if you want to hear it with a 400-person choir, watch for it. So that's such a positive thing, one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. You started that tonight. Thank you for doing it.
My mom is on the Getting Higher Choir, so I'll hear it.
I have a place for showing your film.
Oh, good. We'll talk after. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to thank the panelists very much, to Nick and Kevin for coming. I really appreciate it. For Chris and Sue, and for our filmmakers, Ian and Andy. Thank you very much.
Work needs to be interdisciplinary. I started my PhD in IGov, Indigenous Governance, then I moved over to Environmental Studies, and now I'm in education. So my journey has been interdisciplinary, and in that way it's been really helpful for me to begin to work within our traditional knowledge system that was very much interdisciplinary. And the video that I will show, that we're going to take a look at, is just one example of the revitalization of a sustainable practice. It's a very it's a fishery that you'll begin to learn about a fishing practice that we carried out. It had the capability to catch all the salmon. We could have caught them all. It was through our beliefs, philosophies, and practices that we managed the fishery sustainably. And it was not because they were a commodity, but because they were our relatives. And this is just one example. I want to acknowledge the many Indigenous knowledge systems and Indigenous knowledge practices that all have just as much value as this practice does for our people.